I thought to myself, this is such clear proof that Muslim immigration to the United States is a bad thing, that it's going to begin the process of opening people's eyes to how different groups are different. Here these Muslims managed to kill 3,000 Americans. Many of them were in the United States illegal, but they blended in just fine because there were so many other Arabs and Muslims in the United States. And if they're pressed to it, I don't think Americans can name a single benefit that we get from Muslim immigration. I thought, okay, this has just gone so far that people are going to say, okay, Muslim immigration is a bad thing, and maybe they'd start thinking in terms of, well, what about Mexicans? What about Haitians? We're going to start examining things in a realistic point of view. Well, silly me. Silly me. No, we are so hypnotized by this notion both of the importance of diversity and the complete exchangeability of absolutely identical peoples, no matter where they're from, that despite this consistent behavior by a certain group, namely Muslims, we are completely to close our eyes. Once again, there are no patterns here. It is just one freak event after another. In the January issue of American Renaissance, we listed dozens of cases of Muslims who had committed acts of terrorism or who had been caught about to commit these acts of terrorism. They pop up briefly in the news and then they disappear. You just don't hear about it. If you go back and look through the archives, it's astonishing how many of them there are. In fact, just yesterday, I don't know if any of you noticed, Hor Akil and his wife, Amira Akil, were arrested because they were about to smuggle $500,000 to terrorists in Lebanon. They're Lebanese, of course. I guess they're just doing jobs Americans refuse to do. But those people are going to disappear from view, and we are not to draw any conclusions about patterns. No pattern. The only one of these that has really, aside from Muhammad Atta and the guys from 2001, who's gotten any real attention, is Major Nidal Hassan. He's the one at Fort Hood who killed 13 Americans. He tried to kill another 32 Americans, but only wounded. Now here is a fellow who had been noticed by all of his colleagues as one who put Islam first. He was not a loyal American. He was not a real soldier. In fact, in his business card, he had the initials SOA. That stands for Soldier of Allah. Everyone knew that this guy was a menace and a danger, and yet no one dared say this guy is a problem, because if you call attention to a Muslim who's a problem, that's negative stereotyping. You better not do that. These are not patterns. These are just freak occurrences. And 3 days after the shooting, my good friend George Casey, General George Casey, well then he was Army Chief of Staff, he was very worried about a possible backlash against Muslims. He said it would be a shame if our diversity became a category. Well, those 13 dead Americans, they were casualties of diversity. And this guy, Nidal Hassan, was not the first. I don't know if any of you remember Hassan Karim Akbar. That was the guy in 2003, just before the invasion of Iraq. He was out there in Kuwait, I believe it was, preparing to move in. He too was a Muslim first. And he ended up killing his commanding officer. He killed a captain and a major and wounded 14 more soldiers rather than go into action against fellow Muslims. Now, again, these are casualties of diversity. There are only about 8,000 Muslims in the armed service. Which would be better? Simply to say, look, I'm sorry, we want people who are going to be thoroughgoing Americans. You may consider this a negative stereotype, but we want our soldiers to stay alive. Or is it better to let them come into our armed services and kill our soldiers? But no, we are not to draw any conclusions. If we were as blinded to the obvious in every other aspect of our life, this is the way we would behave. I'll give you an example. Let's imagine that you own a little company and you've had to buy computers for your staff. You buy a dozen computers from Megadigit Computer Company. Well, every one of them, after a couple of weeks, just falls apart. They don't work. They're no good. Well, if you thought about Megadigit computers the way we're supposed to think about them, most of you say, well, there's no pattern here. No, these are just freak occurrences. I'm going to go out and buy more of them. I wouldn't dare arrive negative stereotype conclusions about this kind of computer. That is the kind of insane thinking that we are forced to adopt when it comes to different cultural and racial groups in the United States. Well, there's worse. I'm thinking now of a strange and obscure country. It is so strange and obscure that I suspect no one in this room has ever been to it. I suspect that no one in this room has ever met anyone who is from it. And I bet you nobody here has even known anyone who's ever been to the country. I'll give you a hint. In 2000, one of our warships was anchored off this coast and was attacked. Yes, that was the USS Cole, and the country is Yemen. Well, Yemen is officially a sponsor of state terrorism, according to the U.S. government. Well, according to the U.S. government, Yemenis are also bearers of such incalculable and precious gifts of diversity that they are part of the diversity visa program. This is a system whereby we raffle off green cards and citizenship to anybody who wants it. And since 2000, since the year 2000, over 1,000 Yemenis have come to the United States bringing these priceless gifts of diversity, despite the fact that they are from a country that is an official sponsor of terrorism. We so crave their diversity that we invite them to come, and of course they come. Now, it's not just Yemen, Cuba, Iran, Sudan, Syria. These are all state sponsors of terrorism. And yet, the gifts of diversity that our government has decided they can bring to us are so precious that they too come by the thousand due to this diversity visa. Now, does this sound like a policy straight out of the nut house? Well, yes, you're right. It's a policy straight out of the U.S. Congress. Now, I had said to you that I thought that there was this possibility that there was a possibility of the silver lining from the 2001, the 9/11 attacks that would make Americans start thinking in terms of just who are these people who are coming to our country. And if there had been a silver lining, and if Americans had been prepared to think in terms of Hispanics, there are a couple of things that they might have noticed. It's well known that Hispanics have higher crime rates, welfare dependency rates, legitimacy rates, divorce rates, etc., than whites. One of the things that I'd like to concentrate on is academic performance. Hispanics, they are the group that drops out of high school most frequently. They are 3 times as likely as whites and twice as likely as blacks to drop out of high school. Even by the 3rd generation in the United States, Hispanics are still more likely than blacks to drop out of high school. And what's even worse, the ones who manage to stay in, by the time they are 12th graders, Hispanics are reading and writing at the average grade level of 8th graders who are white. They are 4 years behind, on average, by the time they reach the 12th grade. At the same time, the traditional trajectory for immigrants to the United States from Europe has been a steadily upward path. The first generation often started at the bottom, the second generation, third generation, they moved up. That's not the case with Hispanics, particularly Mexicans. The first generation that gets here, they're grateful just to be in a country that works. They're happy to be in a place where the police are not all on the take, where there are nice public libraries, where things work, telephone systems work, and many of them work hard, no question about it. It's the next generation, the ones that grow up here. As I told you, by the time they get to high school, they haven't learned much, but one thing they have learned is that America is a